If you can hear me, I'm putting in the chat a link that will basically, if you would like to read along at the same time as you're listening, if that's helpful for you for any reason, you can click on this link and it will open a tab in your internet browser and you'll be able to read along. It's pretty accurate, it's not perfect, but you'll be able to read along the live transcript of our session right now.
So welcome everyone. Well, I think we'll get started now. This is the third session in our Advent series called Goodwill to All, and it's a public, intentional, and explicit conversation on the anti-racism in the church, but specifically around the anti-racism declaration that recently came out in October, and kind of a response to that from BIPOC speakers and clergy and other sources, and looking at how we can vision through this in some way. And so we welcome you here. This is group is sponsored by the Chinook region for Southern Alberta. We are the Affirming Connections with Pam Rocker, and I'm with the Urban Indigenous Circle. And I'll let Pam introduce herself next.
Thank you so much, Tony. My name is Pam Rocker. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming to you from Treaty 7 in Calgary. This is the third in our 4-part series. So whether you're joining us tonight for the first time, or this is your third time with us, we really warmly welcome you into these conversations. I wanted to let you know one of the many reasons why Affirming Connections, which is the initiative that I work for, is a part of this. Basically, some of the work that we do is work alongside faith communities in the United Church of Canada to help them promote and give them a platform to do stronger and deeper affirming work, as well as resource individual LGBTQ2S+ folks in their affirming journey, and advocate for human rights, specifically for queer folks in the political realm as well. And we're really lucky to get to do this, both with Chinook Winds and also with support from St. Andrew's Regional Ministries here in Calgary. And one of the things that we use is the acronym PI to talk about how to really, go into what it means to be affirming. And those letters are public, intentional, and explicit, PI. We even have National Affirming Pi Day on March 14th every year, so 3.14 PI. And talking with Tony and doing more work on having conversations around anti-racism in the church and being more aware that our work is more similar than not, we really thought, how can we translate this public, intentional, explicit into how we deepen that and our anti-racist stances as part of being a part of this denomination and as individuals. So I invite you into this time on behalf of Affirming Connections and all the amazing folks who support this work. And I'm so glad that you've joined us, especially in December, in a very busy, unusual season, to say that this is important to you. So thank you for being here, and we'll give it back to Tony.
Thank you. We will turn to our elder, Talenny Dividing Thunder, sorry. And from the Kainai Nation in Southern Alberta, and their work with the trans and two-spirit community has helped a lot of people. And so we're glad that they are able to join us here today to offer our opening prayer and say a few words. And we will turn that over to you now.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Talenny. I use my Blackfoot Indian name is Ayaki Tukumi, and that means dividing thunder. And that is my grandmother's name. So traditionally, that's what we use as our Indian name, that we don't follow our father's name or our husband's name. We follow, back then we just had one name. We didn't have a surname. I mean, a first name. We just had one name that we used. And anyways, it would change when you do something like with victory and stuff like that, then your name would change with that. Hey? So that's what my name is, Indigiqueer, Dividing Thunder. So I'm gonna kind of put the camera down so you could see that I'm using this smudge here. And this is what we use to, was given to a native people. Creator gave us like the sweet grass, the smudge, the pipe, and the sweat lodge for us to help ourselves in this life to overcome obstacles that we all go through. It's a part of life. So I use a lighter because some people say to use wooden matches, but back then we didn't have wooden matches. So it doesn't matter about what you use to light your smudge. The main thing is that you're, you know, smudging and praying. That's the main thing. In Blackfoot, we use the number 4 in our ceremonies. So I'm gonna put the sweet grass on 4 times. And I'll pray in my language, then I could translate after. But I was told by the elder at Dunn that we pray in our own language because our language, it has a spirit in it too, and it strengthens your prayer. Hi, and the tweety peaks namaste. Hi, oxystiwakin and namaste. Stonio kaikitumi. Hi, and the tweety peaks. Matskapuchi. Hi, and the tweety peaks. Ispako, hi, kimatikin and namaste. Hi, and the tweety peaks. But sochi, hi, kimatikin and namaste. I'm a do 6 and spoon. So I'm gonna put a little bit of this other incense here. Hi, and the tweety peak. Hi, kimatikin. Hi, oxystiwakin. Hi, spoon. Hi, and the tweety peaks. Hi, kimatikin. Hi, kimatikin. Panasuka Pasansi, Awawaki, Scansi, Skitsipaki, Xansi. Auntie, God's the beat to me. I have bad the beats, and he's got Pasapuka Pasimanan. Get buckets boot to Spinak Saku. Auntie, let's stick him at the bean, not big wigs. Up a dumpster, man. 6 up, Auntie, much sticky. It's at the behind your gods the bimotsi open and espumotsi open and I guess you better be open and ekimotsi open and esumotsi open and I guess you got ice the best you got sending and keki is soft. This the waps open and a gamutan. Hey. So the prayer there was that Creator put us on earth with all the different races in the world, and that we learn to understand each other better and that we can get along better with each other. Those are the words that I said. And at the end, I said, Estawap. So that means that we prosper in life and akamutan, that we overcome things that we, obstacles and stuff, that it's just a part of life that we learn and that we overcome these things in our life. So I just wanted to share that with you today. And I'm a sun dancer on my reserve, on the blood reserve. Again, that means many chiefs, and it's in southern Alberta. We're 20 minutes from the US border, Montana border. So that's where my tribe is from. So I'm glad to be here this evening.
Thank you so much for that prayer and for your presence here with us today. We are gathered in this area and we give thanks for all of the gifts of our relationship that go deep and have been for a long time. And so it's an honor to have you pray for us here and the work that we are about to do in the church, the United Church here, and those that come from other denominations and other places, other spaces. You're all welcome here to take part in the work that we engage with, because it's for all of us. and it's important that we acknowledge and take time for that. We also have another guest here, Spirit River, or hang on, I'm trying to share a screen here, sorry. Spirit River Stripewolf is joining us here as well, and will help take part in some of the discussions here, and we'll turn to them a little bit later. So I will do our acknowledgement here, provide a recap here that I've been doing for the past couple of weeks, and just to reflect on our treaty and our lands that we come from here and how we do these acknowledgements. So in the Chinook Winds region, we reside in the territory of Treaty Number 7, which was signed in 1877 between the British Crown and the Indigenous people of Southern Alberta and the Church. My family, the Snow family, was one of the original signatories of this treaty, along with the Methodist Church that later became the United Church of Canada. As a descendant, we lift up the United Church's work when it comes to dismantling discrimination, addressing injustices, and creating a better balance in our institutions. In this map here, you see the territories of all nations from this land, traditional territory map, and we overlap and we work within each other's territories and according to our placement from the Creator. And so we all have connection to these lands. My father, the late Dr. Reverend Chief John Snow, was the first ordained Indigenous minister in the United Church. And from this tradition, again, we lift up the Church's work as an advocate and ally. But we also recognize where the Church has failed to live up to its creed and must work to achieve a better relationship with Indigenous people from all provinces and territories. The Chinook Winds region and the colonial framework of provincial boundaries also includes the territories bounded by Treaty Number 4 and Treaty Number 6, though we have much to do to address the needs and impacts of those regions today. So as we name them, we acknowledge the relationship and their presence, that their presence and their voice will require. We take heart that from our people, the treaty message from the oral tradition of my Stoney elders has always said that the treaty is based on peace. We remember that though we have endured much racism, discrimination, and hardship because of systemic inequalities and biases, we are here today to work together to achieve a better balance. And even in the face of insurmountable odds, we still persist. And by persisting, we are beginning to see change. We recognize the land and the historical relationship we share in this land with our Niitsitapi relatives and the Tsuut'ina relations, and with our relations in Métis Region Number 3. We are each part of this story in this land, and each contribute to the greater story of what reconciliation means today and what it will mean for future generations. So that is our acknowledgement of the land and our relationship here today. I'm just going to jump in a bit of a recap that we do at the beginning of these sessions to try to bring people up to speed and present some information that we have garnered from our relationship. But before I do this, I'm going to welcome Spirit River and ask them to give a greeting and say hello. And I'll turn to them now.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Excuse my background. I was doing a photo shoot and I forgot to remove it. So it'll be gone when I speak a little bit later on. But yeah, my name's Spirit River Stripewolf. I'm from the Begunning First Nation of the Blackfoot Confederacy here in Treaty 7. Sorry, I was a little bit late. I had some technical issues, but yeah, I'm grateful to be here and I'm excited to have the conversation we have today.
Thank you. So I'll go to the screen that I was just sharing. And I'm just going to go over some of the detail here. And we'll have this available for those who want a copy of that. But what I'm trying to do here is trying to interweave now. We had our first session where we talked about the intercultural church and the work that I've done over this past year in the Indigenous church to kind of understand and look at some of the historical conditions into which this relationship exists. And so what we talked about from the beginning last time was in the 1960s, there was a shift in the United Church of Canada's relationship with Indigenous people and started to become a different type of relationship. And we also see that into 1960s, there was a reference in the, at the bottom here, you have the LGBTQIA Two-Spirit timeline that I'm drawing some of its information from. In the 1960s, there was a declaration that called homosexuality a sin. And so it took until later down in this information when they took that back. And so what we're seeing is this shift going on, and that in that shift, there are a number of different movements that are happening, and that we all coincide with the same church, interface the same church, and bring ourselves a little more into view and a little more into our space as a intercultural entity and as part of the larger story of the United Church. So in the 1970s, 1980s, we had the ecumenical movement. We've often talked about the Stony Park with the Indian Ecumenical Conference at Morley, and the drawing of a number of different denominations, a number of different Indigenous groups from across North America and South America to Morley to do a lot of the groundwork on understanding spirituality, understanding, demystifying the relationships there. At that same time, what I'm taking from the timeline is that lesbian and gay groups were forming in the church through the 1970s and 1980s and gaining more of a presence and a need within that. So in 1984, the United Church affirms acceptance of all human beings as persons made in the image of God. And this becomes one of the foundational movements forward. We see in 1986, there's the first United Church apology to the Indigenous people for colonialism. And so we continue on this timeline to see some of the major movements that are happening. So in 1988, again, at General Council 32, all people, regardless of sexual orientation, are welcome as full members of the church. And so these movements continue to explore these issues and bring forward some response. I think for me, when I was looking at the timeline, 1992, with the Human Rights Act, where the church urges sexual orientation, the inclusion of sexual orientation into the Human Rights Act. It was successful in that actually was adopted in 1996. And so some of the efforts of the United Church, I think we need to respond to and lift up, saying these happened, and there were good moves made in and amongst the other efforts that were happening. So Affirm United formed in 1995. That was an amalgamation of the Affirm group and Friends of Affirm, the other allied groups that came into one being. In 1998, we have the second United Church apology, which was an apology for residential schools. And the repercussions of that. So that led to the work that happened later on with the TRC and all of these other groups. I often credit the United Church as being one of the first to come out with that position of apology and starting to work to rectify. So in 2000, the United Church adopted an anti-racism policy. At the same time, the work of the Affirming Congregations program coalesced into view and became endorsed, and other churches were encouraged to take part in it. And so since that time, we've had a number of efforts in bringing churches to an affirming moniker that says who they are and what their beliefs are. And so it I think has been very influential in terms of other denominations and other forms of Christianity, other groups out there that are looking at what that affirming process is about, and why it's important that they begin to understand and dismantle some of the prejudices. It's not happening everywhere, but and even in the United Church, we are continuing to explore that. 2006, the Intercultural Church Commitment was made. In 2008, the Government of Canada issued its apology for residential schools, and the Residential School Settlement Agreement was signed. In 2009, the United Church put forward a commitment to inclusion. In 2012, there was an intercultural vision adopted. And I've sort of labeled these in different ways. So the orange is kind of, if they're Indigenous related, that green color is more of its affirming or LGBTQ, 2IA plus related. And then the yellow is kind of if it's intercultural or BIPOC related. And so these three stories become interwoven. Towards the end here, 2015, we have the TRC recommendations adopted by the United Church. The United Church has also taken on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and incorporated that into their process. And the Calls to the Church, which was the document drawn up by the Indigenous elders of the United Church to direct how they would become involved, or how they would be involved going forward with the church, became adopted and approved in 2017. Government of Canada apologized to LGBTQ IA 2+ people in November of that year. In 2019, the Missing and Murdered Women and Two-Spirit report was released, and we have not seen action on that. We have seen a bit of action more lately in the development of a strategic plan to deal with that, but we have not seen any repercussion of that to trickle down into some of our institutions like policing or governance. And so the national consultation on affirming ministries took place also in 2019, where 13 different faith communities and faith-based groups came together to start to form the Canadian Coalition of Affirming Ministries, which is an idea so far. And the similar type of effort to work into this 2020 anti-racist intentional denominational declaration. So it's a commitment to become an anti-racist denomination in the future. And as we work towards that, what is that going to look like? And so that's the reason for the session here today, and how we come together with an expectation and understanding that things are changing, and that the voices of those that have not been heard need to be brought to the forefront, and that we can then find some way to process that. I was talking to Pam earlier today and asking how many affirming churches were actually complete in their process, and how many where we stand on the numbers, because there was a question in 2008 where we only had 101 out of all the churches in Canada. And so now we have the 230 and 170 in process. And so looking at how the church is shifting and how that work is continuing. Pam, did you want to add anything at this point in this recap?
I think it's a great recap, and I just wanted to mention that one of the documents that Tony referenced that he does have cited on the bottom of that slide, I included in the chat. So this is just, as with all of our history, whether we're really deeply involved in the United Church or not, it's really great and eye-opening, I know for me, to see the different commitments and progress we've made as a denomination when it comes to these different intersections. And so if you haven't had a chance, this is something that you can take a look at as, not only to see what progress we've made over time, which is really encouraging, but also recognizing the commitments that we've made that we are still living into. So you can visit it there. And then throughout the night, if there's any other documents that come up, I'll try to share them here. To know our history is extremely important. And it also gives us, hope and commitment that we can continue to push these things forward. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think one of the ideas, one of the terms around this is that we are building on the shoulders of others who have done this work and who have worked through a lot of challenges in getting to this point. And so we continue that work, and it's a thread line through the church's doctrine in order to find a space for all. And that is brings us to our theme today. One of the things that we have been enjoying in the past little bit is our Advent series videos that we've been putting together, and they're all available on the Chinook YouTube page as they become available.
Fortitude, in our language, fortitude, I would say, Winjain Chinabi, meaning have faith of your prayers. That would be fortitude, Winjain Chinabi.
In our teaching of Assiniboine culture, the third virtue that we observe this week is fortitude. And fortitude to the Stoney people means to have faith, means to greet one another in that sense that each is a child of the Creator, and each is a symbol on earth of that love of the Creator, who set people here for a purpose, who set people here to work together to become one community and to live in harmony with our surroundings. At this time, we remember that lesson and the importance of accepting, the importance of being open to one another, and the importance of nurturing that love for all humankind.
Our two-spirit traditions are much older than European contact. For many nations, Indigenous people who identified as two-spirit, gender-diverse, or non-binary in their orientation and gender expression were taken as gifted, lifted up as advisors, healers, and leaders in the community. Today, many struggle to find a place in an increasingly hostile and intolerant colonial world, with higher than average rates of poverty, homelessness, isolation, increasing the likelihood of domestic violence, sexual abuse, discrimination, and physical violence. How we open our communities and our humanity towards each other matters. As a denomination, how we negotiate that place of safety, place of sanctuary, place of respite matters.
Ne data tasami hiubine. Na hanin tos da intibas da ngagi chidawi huna. Tokuta da antie chin ingegi nangabi chedut. Na hechen ungogiji kamit.
And so, as we reflect upon that message of having a sense of hope and connection to our Creator, a sense of purpose, and a sense of what it means to be in relationship, and how that extends to the relationships that have formed before us, and how we look into the future, at the future relationships of people as we change as a society. We came through a very important and critical time of change, and how we look forward with the advent of the advocacy for Black Lives Matter, with the missing and murdered women issue brought to the forefront, with other challenges to institutional authority. How we respond collectively is how our church will, in the end, look. And from this point, we begin to start to explore what those visions, what those understandings are. And so I'm going to invite newly minted Reverend Murray Pruden to speak to us. Murray is a descendant and a voice for a community that started here in the West. So we have the work of Henry Bird Steinhauer, who Murray is a descendant of, and the work of that family to bring the type of Christianity, the type of Methodism, the type of understanding that opened up for us, at least in Morley, that vision of the world and the vision of how we approach belief in a new way, in a way that is compatible and in a way that is synchronic with others, and being able to find a connection. And I think that the work that Murray has done first in his position at Pacific Mountain Region, and now as his new position as Executive Minister of Indigenous Ministries and Justice, I think rings to that ideal. And I'd like to welcome Murray and thank you for being here, and open the floor to you as you are welcomed.
Great, thank you so much, Tony and Pam, for allowing me to be here. Good to see both of you and see some faces I've noticed in the Zoom chat here, and also I'll do a shout out there to Susan, who I knew from Winnipeg and at the Center for Christian Studies, and but it's good to be here. Tanse, thank you for allowing me to be here. As Tony said, I'm fourth generation descendant of Reverend Henry Bird Steinhauer, who was a United Methodist minister back in the day in Alberta, missions out in created missions in Morley, Musquechees, and in my home communities of Saddle Lake and Goodfish Lake First Nations. I'm Cree Nihil from Treaty 6 territory. I'm actually in my home area in the town of Smoky Lake. Actually, town of Smoky Lake is where the old Fort Victoria, which actually is where Reverend Henry Bird Steinhauer was actually missioned out to. So our roots are over here in this area as well. It's in this county. And I'm originally living right now in Burnaby, BC on the West Coast. Due to COVID and due to my new position as National Executive Minister, I unfortunately can't make my way out east to Toronto just yet because of the restrictions and everything going out east. And but I'm able to be with my family currently during these unfortunate times, and just making sure that I'm safe and everyone's safe around me and communities are safe. I kind of just want to take a little bit of time just to talk about our Indigenous communities right now are very much suffering due to this current pandemic. Since I started my position in July with the National Church, I've been in getting constant messages from communities, and more so since the second wave started in September, October, and more so these last few weeks from communities across Canada within our 64 Indigenous communities that we administer and service and mission with. It's an ongoing thing, and I do ask that you send your prayers to all our communities and across this nation, across this great land. It's just very much hard to hear these messages coming from so many people and their families and communities, and of course, we're doing our best we can to support through the United Church and through Indigenous Ministries as well. So I just want to make that note out to everybody, and I'm sure that you're hearing it from your communities as well, as I see the many faces on this Zoom call as well. But yes, thank you for having me. And with that in mind too, I just want to talk about a little bit about the Indigenous Ministries and I guess my experience with what Tony has just presented there. And it was a very good timeline to see and actually to have that visual aid to see of the timeline. But in my perspective, and I do like to acknowledge that I'm two-spirited as well. So I do find that timeline, you know, and it's not saying anything negative, but it's I find it being coming from the two-spirit mindset. It's very heteronormative way of presenting something, and the reason why I say that is because culturally speaking, and I can only speak for myself and my Cree teachings and being a Cree person, that what I find missing in that timeline is the spiritual nature of it, the spiritual identity of it, and that's also coming from a two-spirited mindset. When we talk about being two-spirited, it's firstly and affirmingly a spiritual being, a spiritual identity, rather than a sexual or gender role. That comes along with it, but it's firstly your spiritual essence and your spiritual leadership, because that's what I've been taught, is that we are spiritual leaders for our peoples across, you know, all our nations. We're like being the minister for a community, right? That's kind of where I feel that I'm being blessed as being a reverend these days, is because I have that opportunity to fulfill that as who I am, and within my communities and for my people, and also just for the sense of taking back that identification of two-spiritedness, because as Tony has mentioned, and Pam's mentioned too, we're now in this new time within the church and within the world, really, with the identification of Christianity, within the identification of spirituality, and of identifiedness of being who you are, in a sense too, and that's we're in a big turn of the page of the book of life, I guess, in where we're at, and it's very exciting, but can also be a little bit fearful in these times, because we are now asked to step forward to become that change, and to be that change. But then it's that old Cherokee story, is with the two wolves, right? You know, you have the good wolf and you have the bad wolf, and you know, the elders asking his grandchild, you know, you have two wolves within you, and you have a light one and you have a dark one. One is very angry and one is very satisfied and very happy and full of joy. Which one do you feed? So we have a responsibility now, and I think as Indigenous people, but also as two-spirited, and just as people of faith, we have a responsibility rather than a role to lead, you know, spiritually and such, to that question: how do we do this? Do we do it in a way that's going to bring some more negative in this world, because there's so much of that happening right now, or do we do it with more positive, with a more of strength and of truth and honesty? And I'd rather do that. So with that saying, it's very much we're at a new position, a new standing point within this identity and self-identity, and it's changed. This morning, actually, I had a meeting with a colleague on and with some other, with another colleague as well, R.W. Holstra that's living in Edmonton right now, and we had a meeting with a United Church personnel just on discussions about application forms and how we're trying to change the format to be inclusive about the sexual orientation, gender orientation, and how do we put Two-Spirit in there. So we had a very big long talk about that. So we're at a place of trying to be inclusive, and we're trying to do it in a way that we're not just saying, and we're not just doing it because it has to be done. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's, I think, always the biggest question is saying, are we doing this for the right reasons? Are we doing this for the goodness of all? Because I always find that when we talk about being Indigenous, we don't talk about ourselves. We talk about everybody. We talk about everybody that's in our community. We talk about everybody that's in our family, our friends, our circles, and that's what it means to be, Indigenous, or to be, I would say this means to be Cree, from the land. Is all those internal connections. Being, the idea of Two-Spirit is a personal journey, and I think many of those here present in this Zoom, and just in general in society, being an Indigenous person in this time, has always had its struggles. And again, back to this meeting this morning, it was interesting because we're talking about how recently so much has changed within that process of identity, and even from 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, how much has changed with how we're trying to be inclusive, but we're also trying to learn as well. And for a person who's Two-Spirited, we're still at that infant stage of the circle. We're still at the beginning phases of reclaiming ourselves back. And I always like to say that, within the Indigenous circle, we've been outside of that circle since we've been ousted by Christianity, by the Jesuits, and by first contact, because we were considered competition to the Jesuits in the uprising and teachings of spirituality. So we were outcasted, and so so a lot has been lost. A lot of that identity has been lost. A lot of culture, language, everything. So it's when we talk about just reflecting on the video that was presented here, when the elder was talking about our loss of assimilation, when we've lost our ways, we lost our culture, our language, and all that. But I find it's more so for someone who identifies as Two-Spirited, because we don't have as many elders and teachers, and so we really need to either recreate or really go into a spiritual mindset and presence to try to get that back from spirit. So it becomes a very deep, a monumental experience in time. And so we really need to start embracing that and expanding that within the circle of within the circle of anti-racism as well. And I find it more so within the queer community, that the thoughts of Two-Spiritedness is became very commercial in the last several years, but at the same time, we have to have those allies, right? And we need to. But at the same time, we're also in that path of continuously teaching of what that means. Because I do know, and I can speak this from the Indigenous Church, Indigenous Ministries, that the United Church has very much taken that threshold of being an affirming church, and that's very great to see and happen. And I do continue to see that success and accept that and appreciate that success. But unfortunately, within the Indigenous Ministries and Indigenous Church, we're not there yet. So I've actually been presenting to my staff and to the Indigenous Church that going into 2021, that we need to start taking that step forward to start joining the rest of the United Church to be affirming. And I'll just say this kind of like on a personal experience. Several years ago, I was actually at San Soto Spiritual Center doing some courses on gender and gender and family violence, and being in a circle with a group of colleagues and a group of other students that I've really appreciated. I got very nervous because we're going to be touching on topics, for me was very sensitive, and I was very much not really, I'd say out to them in a sense. And I really, wanted to make sure that, I wanted to hear what do other Indigenous communities know about, being affirming or being accepting of our own people, of our own two-spirited people. And so it was being a little bit nervous in that circle of learning, and just to listen to some of the stories that of some colleagues saying that our communities don't have that. We don't deal with that. We don't, that's not something that's present in our communities. And, and I kind of, had to really bite my tongue and just sit there and just take it. And then, because I knew different, I knew different from what they were saying, because in most, if not all of our, Indigenous communities, we have so many young people and youth, and not even youth anymore, but people middle-aged that are committing suicide because they don't want to bring any type of shame or disrespect, or they don't feel that they're in a safe place to say and express who they are. So I really knew that what some of my colleagues were saying was not true. And so at the end of our learning circle, we always do a closing sharing, and I shared with my colleagues, and I talked to the elders that were present prior to that, and they they just wanted to reassure me that I was in a safe place to do so. But I shared with them about my identity, and I said, this is who I am, and I'm not a different person from who I was, 5 minutes before explaining who I was. So I really want you guys to know, so you understand, the level of respect and trust I expect from this circle and from my colleagues, because we are all leaders together, and we need to start making these rightful judgments and start supporting one another, because I told them that I'm scared. I'm scared for all our people. I'm scared for all our other two-spirited people, because I'm tired of hearing the stories. I might tear up here of back home of youth going, hanging themselves in the garden shed because because they're they're scared to say what they are is what the Creator made them to be, is just another loving creation. And it's tough to hear that on a constant basis, and and that's my hope and dreams, is to see that acceptance being united, and that's why I really want to see this push for this acceptance by our Indigenous church membership across Canada, because it's needed, and it's been needed for generations. And I'm really hopeful for this generation, because I feel that this generation is becoming that voice, and really starting to stand up and take that stance much more so. For myself and so many others, we couldn't. It was a different, we didn't have as many choices as well. You're either you're gay or you're not, and that's all there was. So we've evolved, and we've changed in our perspectives and understandings. And I'm really hopeful to really encourage our youth to guide us in this as well. So I think I'll kind of stop there. Great. And let you guys lead on.
Sure. I want to turn to Talenny and then to Spirit to give kind of your take on that. I think part of the when I think about the traditions and because on the Stoney Reserve, we don't necessarily have a rich tradition that's followed. We've tended to see more of the anglicized, Christianized view of two-spirit placement, and less of a tradition. We do still have, and I'll show a video after we do this, in that way of connecting. But you guys, both you, Talenny, and of Spirit, and apology for saying you guys, but to say that both of you come from rich traditions in your culture that still remember what it means and how you practice and what you are taught and how you enter the world the way the Creator made you. And I think there's a strength beyond that, because when I hear, I appreciate the affirming suggestion, but I also understand that it's a way of lifting up our culture and giving that back so that we can do the affirming process our own way, in a way that is meaningful to our cultures, in a way that restores that balance. For me, it's a move toward reconciliation. So I'll stop talking and let you respond to them.
Okay, well, I guess so. I was raised on the Blood Reserve, Ghana, and I went to the boarding school, grade 2 to grade 6, and my parents went there, and my grandfather, he lived to be 104 years old, and he went to the one out by Calgary. And so when I started my to support our Two-Spirit people on the Blood Reserve here, I went to some elders to get information from them, and a lot of them didn't know too much information on it because they're very really into the Catholic Church, and then also with our culture, the elders, they don't really talk about sexuality. And I find being Two-Spirit, it seems people think first about the sexual behaviors or whatever, being with another same sex. And so they find it's uncomfortable to talk about that type of stuff, because I find that's the first thing they think about. But, it's it's about our spirit, our life, who we are. And anyways, but I did get information from some elders there at our Kainai Studies program. His name is Bruce Wolfchild. He said that we call them man that's gay, we call them awawaki. And then for a woman, it's called a man-hearted woman. That's skitsipahpaki. So because we have those names for them, it's they're part of the culture, because if we have like a plant or a bird, stuff like that, you know, in nature, and they have an Indian name to them, then they're a part of the culture. Because we had names specifically for Two-Spirit people, then it was part of our culture. Because there's some elders that are so lost, or some people, you know, brainwashed into the Catholic Church, and that they say, they think that it's not part of our way of life. You know, that, you know, they just really don't think about it, and they're very, they get it mixed up with, well, I hate to say that, but sexual abuse, hey? I've worked at this adult treatment center for 7 years. And then when I do presentations there on Two-Spirit, and some of them get very upset. And the one guy, you know, he was saying, and so I could tell that they were getting mixed up with being sexually abused by a man, and they just put it in with that person was gay. But that's totally different. That person was a pedophile. He wasn't a gay person. He was a pedophile. But people don't, you know, really, they just go with the anger and the emotions and upset about what happened to them. And then they put all these people in the same category. And then, so on my reserve growing up, there was a lot of men that were beaten up, and then they had to leave the reserve. A lot of them lived risky lifestyle. They had to end up like in Vancouver, taking these drugs that, you know, and they come back in a coffin, in a box, you know, because the people here won't accept them due to the, you know, because of the church saying that this was wrong. So prior to that, it was okay. There's a story we have of a woman, she was a woman warrior, running eagle, Bita Mahka. And that's in East Glacier. When you go into Montana, there's a waterfall, and that waterfall was where she was, her comrades, she was a woman warrior leader for many years. And finally, when she was killed by the Flathead tribe, and then her comrades brought her back this way, and they buried her by those waterfalls, and they called it after her, those waterfalls. But when the white people came in, they were naming that Glacier National Park, all the different names, St. Mary's River, Duck Lake, and just all that. And when they seen her, those two waterfalls, they're both on top of each other, these waterfalls, kind of like the one behind me in a way. Anyways, so they called it Trick Falls instead. And so, but then later on, the native people there in Montana, the Blackfeet people, they went to court, and then they won their case, and they got that name back for that waterfall and for that woman warrior. And so it's called Bita Mahka. It's Running Eagle Falls, and people can go there. And I've gone there before. I've smoked my pipe there and done smudge there, and I could just feel the presence of someone, you know, like a spirit is, it's alive. It's the bisco. That means there's spirits there, hey, from back. And because I was calling her name, because I was praying to her, because this is where they said she was like, I believe that that was her spirit that came to us when we were smoking the pipe, and when we make tobacco offerings there, hey. So it's very good that what you're doing here, getting, like, it's your name, United Church. So that means everybody, to include everybody. And so with the Two-Spirit people, you know, we lived a hard life, but we are still, you know, like what we said, we're spiritual people. We have understanding of both male, female. And back then there's different tribes where they would adopt the children that were orphans. So we had our roles, and I think too sometimes because of sometimes it's I find it's in families like me with my family. Well, there's 10 of us, my siblings, and I'm the third youngest. None of us, I'm the only one that's Two-Spirit. But with my cousins, my first cousins and that second cousins, that there's some that are Two-Spirit too. So it's kind of goes in families, and like they say that our ancestors and that they're part of who we are. And I think that's partly why we're kind of more spiritually connected. And yeah, so I just wanted to share that. There's more things I could share, but right now my mind, I'm just grabbing things that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Spirit River, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. I took some notes down when I was kind of inspired by Talenny and by Murray. And thank you so much for sharing what you've shared. I also identify as Two-Spirit. I do a lot of volunteering with Hillhurst United Church's Affirming Committee. And so I do a lot of, I do volunteering where I can. I was recently elected as president for my Students Association at Mount Royal University. So that's kind of taken a lot of my time. Being a pandemic president, it's been an interesting experience. So I haven't been able to dedicate as much time to the church as I would like to. A little bit about me is that my father was a Baptist pastor. And so I grew up in the Baptist denomination. My father was part of the 60s Scoop, and my mother was part of the day school program, where they both went through significant physical and psychological violence, which was part of my experience growing up. Some of the reflections that I have is, especially on Two-Spirit and my relationship with the church specifically. I'm not an elder, and I'm not a minister or anything like that. I'm just Spirit River. But my relationship with the church is something interesting that I feel like I haven't really thought it out clearly until recently. So I guess Affirming Connections is doing this thing about our relationship with hell. And I was asked to be interviewed for that. And it was a really interesting conversation where I was like, oh yeah, talk about hell, my experience growing up with Christianity. And then some of the questions, I was like, wow, I didn't even realize for my own responses and what this meant in my reflection with the church. And I think that's where when I think about my reflection with the church, it comes with my relationship with hell, and that's really kind of been with me on my journey. But when I think of that, I think of a sense of shame, a sense of not being good enough, a sense of worthlessness. And this concept of hell has been a great weapon of colonization onto Indigenous people. So changing my understanding of hell was my own work of decolonization and healing for myself. Being in the LGBTQI community helped me accept myself. A big part of being in that community is, if you're going to get involved and you're going to volunteer with that community and you're going to be a part of that community, there's a lot of efforts for self-acceptance. And I think that's the harm reduction, and that's the work that community does to lower those suicide rates and poverty rates and homelessness rates. And so part of accepting myself meant I couldn't be part of a spiritual group that saw me as not good enough because of my identity as Two-Spirit. They were just not compatible. One identity had to be dropped for the other. So I walked away from Christianity for a while until I had a deep desire to seek Christ and fellowship again. It was something that I was so familiar with because of my upbringing as a pastor's son. I think that feeling was on purpose. I feel like maybe it was the universe, if it was creator, that it led me to Hillhurst United Church, and it did lead me to the United Church. I've been part of the church for a couple of years now. And it's definitely felt right because many of the elders that I grew up around, my grandparents and my Blackfoot teachers in school on the reserve, you know, they're elders. And so in the Blackfoot area, our, I guess, main church was the Catholic Church, right? And so a lot of these elders are Catholic. And so they kind of had this, I'm not going to try to speak for them, but I think that they had, in my own kind of experience, I feel like they kind of had a similar experience as I did, where they grew up with this sense of spirituality within Christianity, but then wanting to connect back with their own traditional culture. So what I grew up with was that Christianity and the Blackfoot ways of knowing were compatible in so many ways. And so I've really kind of followed that path of really, you know, looking to my Blackfoot ways of knowing and to the Christian faith as part of my spiritual repertoire, as it were. Today, I'm the founder for a board. I'm the founder and board member for Treaty 7's only two-spirit and Indigiqueer society called Sovereign Spirits. We just got started in June and we're growing and developing every day. We try to advocate for Indigenous LGBT and two-spirit folks. Murray highlighted this in his story, that the urgency within our communities, within the Indigenous two-spirit community. We recently lost a two-spirit person on Trans Day of Remembrance a few weeks ago to suicide. The urgency to do more for our community is so important to realize. The solution, I believe, when we're trying to look at, you know, addressing this urgency within our community, I believe that that solution is connecting two-spirit people to culture, and Talenny has been instrumental for that work, educating me, and I always feel so so happy every time I see Talenny, and the wisdom that she's provided to me, and that she's part of Sovereign Spirits as well. And I also believe that the solution is also about ensuring organizations prioritize two-spirit voices in their leadership and in their programming, similar to this one tonight. And yeah, I'm honored to do the work I've been given the opportunity to do, especially within the United Church community. So yeah, thanks, Tony.
Yeah, let's thank you for that. I think that I want to turn for a second to one of the videos that were done. This is from the National Film Board, and I showed this at a couple of other sessions that I've done, and just wanting to highlight for a second some of the try it this way.
The first time when I came out as a jingle dress dancer, two-spirited person, most of the jingle dress dancers out there, they didn't know that I was a guy dancing with the women's category, women's jingle. I kind of regret that. I should have did the proper way. I should have spoke out that I was a two-spirited person.
But all he was doing at that dance, when he was dancing, jingle dancing, He was honoring the female spirit in him. There's nothing wrong with him dancing as a jingle dancer.
In 2000 of August, that's when I went to a powwow in Kamloops with me and my cousin and my friends. That was my first competition powwow ever that I registered myself in women's jingle. And I guess after when everything happened in Kamloops, it was kind of difficult to be a two-spirited person in powwows.
He was humiliated by a misguided elder who had his championship taken away from him.
It kind of made me feel like I was ashamed of myself, of who I was. I was thinking that I guess I'm not doing the right thing. And I thought about just quitting everything right there. My grandma told me a whole bunch of stories about two-spirited people way back in the past. Some two-spirited people became holy people. Two-spirited people was a blessing for the people. They were the persons who look up to the camps. And I guess back then two-spirited people were respectable people.
We all had names for our two-spirited people. We call them Wiante for a male and Winchakte for a female. Since contact, we have learned to judge and condemn our two-spirited people. There was a time when he too was drinking, living a lifestyle that was actually dangerous to his health. But he said he had a dream.
In my dream, it was this big powwow, and these two older jingle dress dancers came up. They told me that the Creator put you on this earth to use a gift. They told me that I was going into the wrong path. And then they told me that if you dance to this, you're going to be healing yourself. And then she said that when you start healing yourself, and then you start helping other people with your healing. These two girls, I've been teaching them for a long time. And then probably...
I learned a lot from him since I was 7. And he taught me the basics of the jingle dress, the sewing, and the healing.
Gio's teachings, I have learned a lot of responsibilities and through cultural wise as well. Get to know myself more spiritually.
As I dance in competition, I don't dance for money or anything. I dance for my people. I dance for myself, Gio, Trish, everybody in my family. Yeah, and hopefully I want to become something like Gio. My role model, my idol. Yeah.
The color green represents healing, and the color purple represents luck in the future. And that's the reason why that I'm making myself a jingle dress that's half green and half purple, because I'm preparing for my healing journey for the future. I guess 6 years ago, after that incident happened, I guess half of my spirit came home with me. And so last night when I walked into the arena, I called my spirit and I told my spirit that I was back. I can't tease people. I can't really tease people how they think or how they act. Only the Creator can tease the people. And only the Creator can tease people's mind. In the Native community, I guess it will take time to accept two-spirited people. And I hope that people can understand where I'm coming from, why I choose to go back there and dance. I guess it's for myself, because I guess I was following my heart. I felt happy that I came back here and danced.
So I just wanted to share that. That's from a member of my nation, families from my nation in Morley. And so they produced that with the National Film Board. And it resounds with that story of connecting to who you are and those traditions, the culture, the roundness of being in and amongst your people, in the security of your connection to the Creator and what has been given to your people, that gives you the foundation of thought and understanding. And
so John here, I just wanted to make a couple comments.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank all the speakers, Murray and Spirit River and Talenny. Thank you for coming. And I think we have a lot to learn. Christianity has a lot to learn from the indigenous teachings. And if I think about what the elder said, Elder Tina Fox in the video, she said that we were trained to think in a colonized way. So we condemned the two-spirited people. That's the colonization. And so we have to unlearn that. We have to decolonize and remember the way we used to treat and respect one another. So I think these are the teachings of indigenous people, and Christianity needs to become more aware and embrace the indigenous teachings. So as a clergy, I'm doing that work of informing, awareness, training, and teaching. And so there's more of us that are needed to do that. And if I look at the biblical, there's requirements under scripture that they say, well, only certain people can marry certain people, but that is something that was given to those people. And if we look into the New Testament, we don't see that. We see that Christ said to love everyone. So the teaching of the indigenous people is more Christian than many of the interpretations. So I think we need to lift up those interpretations and lift up our people. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to share myself. When I was, what I believed out of the being Catholic in the Bible, it said that I was going to go to hell for being two-spirit. And so as a child, I was always scared. I always tried to be, a perfect child, but obviously that's, can't happen. And so I was always fearful. And because of being two-spirit, I knew that I was going to be burned in hell forever. And so that really scared me a lot. But when I did a life skills program, and then when it was done, I felt alone. So I prayed to Jesus and God to help me, Holy Jesus, Jesus and Holy Mary to help me to find a church to pray. And I went to the Victory Church in Lethbridge, but I still felt out of place there. And then the next thing I was, while I was doing my work at the Friendship Center, then I was invited to do some drumming after work. So I did. That's how I slowly was introduced to being a sun dancer. I was a helper and then I became a sun dancer. And that was 30 years ago. My pipe is 29 years old because that first year I was a helper. And instead of my life going worse, because I had a bad problem with alcohol. I was even drinking bad things when I couldn't have the money to buy stuff at the liquor store. But instead, going now in my native way, And it says that it's okay to be two-spirit, that it's we are equal. We're not higher or lower than others. We're equal as everybody. And if we want to be in the holy societies, you know, if we want to be warrior women back then, anything that we wanted to do, we just do it and people accept us. They don't discourage us. And so today now my life is good. I turned away from alcohol and I work with the youth right now. I work at a youth treatment center. I've done that for many years, and I worked also with the adult treatment center. So my life became better when I went into my native spirituality and accepted myself as a two-spirit person. And people don't call me down anymore, but when I drank, people weren't ashamed or they'll just call me down and stuff like that. But I don't go around those kind of places anymore.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from our speakers? If you have anything left to add, Murray or Spirit?
Well, I think the other thing I would like to add is just a reflection from the videos. It kind of, I think, really spoke to a lot that I spoke on. It's just again, we're in a time of fundamental change in just in spirituality, in spiritual nature itself, and reclaiming our identity, reclaiming our footprint here on this land as being in the circle, the circle of equality, of being, you know, those sacred teachings of who we are. And I always say too, and this was one of the things that I've been taught, is that, you know, we talk about our Indigenous circle, and, you know, everybody coming back to this, to our Indigenous identity and circle. And it's really, it will happen, and it will take time, and we will, you know, I don't do this, and I don't say these things for myself. I don't think of myself. I always think of others. I think of my family. I think of the generations to come. I do this for them. I never do it for myself. And that's always how we were taught too, is when you do something, you do it for others. You don't do it for yourself. You do it for the world. You do it for all of your, you know, of Creator's creations, and what the land's provided us. But with the circle, you know, our Indigenous circle that we talk about, the sacred circle that we're in, won't be complete until us, the two-spirited people, are there too. Until that happens, then we know that cycle and this circle has been fully supported and fully where it needs to be. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lot of work on decolonization that still needs to happen in and amongst our communities, and the damage that has been done. It's a lot of work. Spirit, do you have anything for our final words here?
Not really. I think you know, it's a big topic. I just want to tell folks thanks for the comments in the chat, and thanks Murray and Talenny and Tony and Pam for opening the space up. And yeah, it's, you know, anytime we can have these conversations and bring awareness and especially highlighting the importance of highlighting two-spirit voices is, I think, just so important, and that needs to happen more, not only within the church, but in organizations and institutions, you know, in our city and throughout Treaty 7. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Pam. Pam, when we discussed this, we talked a bit about how we would look at the ideas that are presented from the different groups that we're bringing in, and how in ways that we can take that on board so that we're not, and this is part of that decolonization effort, to make the relationships real, make the understandings more salient, and how we work together. And so we're in a way, working through that as we do this. But it's also, I think, a challenge for us to embody it individually and call upon that from the church and from our respective places, how we work toward that meeting.
You're asking me to answer that question?
Just a thought on what do you think is the potential around that, or are we getting through this series a closer connection to that? Or because I see that from the words of Adele and from Paul and from Murray and from Spirit and Talenny, that we are moving toward something as a denomination that we ascribe to and we aspire to. Can we do that without really embodying it in a way that is meaningful? And I think for the people here who come out to hear this, it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I think, you know, things that folks tonight have echoed and others in this series kind of come back to, it is a circle. Like, we do have to do this work together. And even though sometimes, you know, it is helpful to be very specific in the learnings that we do and, you know, provide opportunities for people with particular identities to create community. In addition to that, I think, you know, doing this work of, you know, sort of, you know, I kind of talk about it like, you know, removing the illusion that we're separate, right? Because I think at the end of the day, the social justice work, justice for society that, you know, we all care about, which is why we're here and spending our time here tonight, it's only sustainable if we do it together, you know, because if we only, you know, I say the best activists have anger in one hand and gratitude in the other, right? And so it's, you know, gratitude from all of the people who have come before us, who have laid a way for this conversation to happen, and for, you know, the amazing spiritual leaders that you've had a chance to hear from, for us to be able to even get to hear some of those voices. But the anger comes in when we know that it's kind of a luxury to for this to be a once in a while conversation for some of us, right? And so I think I've learned a lot through this series on, you know, sort of switching out the verbiage for me and not just what do I need to learn about Indigenous communities and Indigenous spirituality and that sort of thing, but not just what I need to learn, but how can I learn from those teachings and apply it to the things that I do, and decolonizing some of the processes that I go through subconsciously. And I think what I love about the United Church and, you know, my work with so many folks in Calgary and beyond is that we have those invitations all the time to do that, you know? And so I do see hope in how so many people are, you know, being woken up, yes, sometimes for the first time, and we're just taking little baby steps, but, you know, our history shows in that timeline that we haven't always gotten it right. We haven't arrived, but we are progressing. And so how can we be invited, as Marie said, to not just do this for us, for me right now, so that it benefits me in this moment, but to benefit all the people who come beyond us. So I hope that makes sense, my answer to you, Tony.
That does. It takes it in the right direction that I was thinking and couldn't express in words about taking it to this work that needs to go outside of this, and how we take these sessions, these learnings, and make it more real in the long run. And so we'll continue on Sunday. There's a 2 p.m. Service that we are closing this series out with, which is more of a churchy type service, and we will have prayers and scripture reading and that type of Sunday best kind of thing. So we will come together again for our final segment on Sunday, this Sunday, the 20th at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And we've also added a December 24th Christmas Eve service at 1 p.m. It's going to be up on YouTube. Find all the information on the YouTube page for Chinook Winds Region, and also on the Urban Indigenous Circle and Affirming Connections, where we release a lot of the information out. And we thank you for coming. We thank you for being here. I'm going to ask Talenny if you can close us out with a closing prayer for this evening, our nighttime prayer.
I'll sing you a song.
Thank you.
With my drum.
Yep.
These songs here, we sing them in the Sweat Lodge and at our Sundance. They're prayer songs. They came from spirit through dreams. People had dreams of them, and then they passed them on. They shared them. And so this is my drum. It's part of some dreams that I had too. This represents the physical world. The brown is like the buffalo hide, the physical world. The 4 races of people that Creator put us with. Mental, this is the things that were made, technology. The white people, they're very smart with the mentality. Then emotions, that's the Oriental people, they do yoga, meditation. Native people, spirituality, it's red. The same as the Creator, the sun represents Creator to us. And the sun turns red in the morning and at nighttime, in the evening, sorry. And then the colored people, physical, they're very good athletes and they're good dancers. Right along through here, there's some blue, you can't see them, but they're blue stars. That's the, we call it the Wolf Trail Makoyosuko. That's the Milky Way, and that's where we travel from the physical world to the spiritual world. We go back and forth, and these are some dreams that I had, so this is spiritual. So that's what my drum here represents. But this song I want to sing, it means, this was one of the first songs that I learned, and the words say, na tu siwa kimukit, San pity me, dayak I'm gonna have a new life. Istanisty, that's the way it's meant to be, because of my way of my life, how I was lost before in the alcohol, and then I changed. I decided to change for a better life, and so this helped me. And I always like the song because it helped me to change. So I'll sing the song for you. And so we're always changing. Nothing stays the same. And so when things change, we pray. We hope that things will change for the best. And so what we're doing here, we hope that it's going to change for the best. Okay. There's the song.
Thank you. And so we, yep. And so we give thanks for that and the gifts you have brought to us today for this session to share. And I'll just close out with our closing prayer. Jesus Christ and Chapter. Amen. Thank you all, and we will see you again and be well and be hopeful for the time that is to come and the work that we do. So blessings to all, and if we don't see you at the next one, Merry Christmas. Good evening. Bye. Bye.